Let's try to get a little bit more understanding of the history of this problem. Joining us now is Nebojša Vujović. He is the charge d'affaires of the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. And Joe DioGuardi is a lobbyist for Albanian American issues and heads the Albanian American Civic League. He is also a former congressman from the state of New York. Welcome to both you gentlemen.
Thank you.
Before we get into the history, Mr. Vujović, you said, I believe it was on the op-ed page of USA Today, that the agreement that was reached at Rambouillet, France, which NATO wants Milosevic to sign, is a fraud, that there is nothing for him to sign. What do you mean?
Yeah, this is a great fraud, and no agreement has been reached in Rambouillet. Neither the talks in Paris really conveyed. What happened is that Albanians signed unilaterally their wish list containing their separatist aspirations. Our delegation wanted to meet with the Albanians directly so that they could reach comprehensive political agreement and then to implement this kind of agreement. But unfortunately that never happened because Albanians really didn't want to engage in a serious talks. Their tactics was to stall the talks and to create NATO military aggression against Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. That is fraud on a grand scale. A NATO military assault against sovereign nation of Yugoslavia would also represent aggression against the Charter of UN, against the final act of Helsinki, of the OSCE, and would be completely and absolutely unjustifiable.
Mr. DioGuardi?
Well, the Albanians certainly didn't get their wish list at Rambouillet. They had to back off on many things, and they did it under great pressure from the United States of America. But what you've just heard is typical Serb propaganda, and they've been saying this for years. You know, we keep hearing that this is an ethnic conflict with religious overtones. What we really have to see here is what happened in 1989. The Albanians were the first to declare themselves for democracy from the former communist state of Yugoslavia. In 1989, 700,000 Albanians threw their Communist Party cards in the bonfire. And that's what started their problem with Slobodan Milosevic, because he's the last vestige of Stalinist communism in Europe. He controls everything. He controls the entire system in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, the press, the universities, the army. He fires people when he wants, and he controls the message. And he has programmed all of his officials with the same message. Look at the outrageous statement made yesterday by one of his officials when they asked about the refugees, and he said, well, that was one Albanian family taking a walk in the park when we saw the villages being torched and the kids and the people being executed. This is the kind of regime that has to be removed from Europe today. I congratulate President Clinton for the wonderful case he made. I'm a Republican, and I congratulate him for the wonderful case he made to the American people, and he's right. We have an interest there. We need a Europe that's united, free, and prosperous. That affects all of us. And one last thing, Bobby. I am a volunteer president of the Albanian American Civic League. It is a registered lobby, but we're all volunteers. And we represent the concerns and interests of 400,000 Albanian Americans. Imagine, we have in America 400,000 Albanians, and they are not far removed from what's going on there. Their families are being killed, and we have a big interest in this.
May I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm not a propagandist. I'm a Serb who was born and raised in Kosovo and whose family was forced to flee Kosovo in 1966 because we've been exposed to ethnic cleansing of grand proportions. Kosovo and Metohija just 3 decades ago were a mixed community where the Serbs constitute 50% of population. Unfortunately, due to the terror and to the cleansing of the Albanian politicians 3 decades long, even my family was forced to flee to Kraljevo, a town in Serbia which we used to call Little Kosovo, because we've been exposed to this kind of situation.
Bobby?
Let me let Mr. Vujović finish real quick, and then I'll have you respond, and then we have to go to break. Go ahead.
So it's not about the regime in Serbia. Kosovo is a cradle of the Serbian nation and of Serbian civilization. For Serbs, Kosovo is what Jerusalem is for the Jews. So no bombing campaign could force us to quit Kosovo, because no politician and no government, no Serbian nation can accept that.
Go ahead.
Well, Bobby, this is total Serbian propaganda. I cannot vouch for the family situation, and I'll have to accept that. But what you've heard is a total lie. This part of the Balkans, Kosovo, was part of the state of Albania that came out of the Ottoman Empire on November the 28th, 1912. That's why you have so many Albanians there. The Albanians are the only indigenous people in the Balkans. They've been there for 10,000 years. The Serbs came from the Ukraine. They came from Russia, 600 AD. When they talk about this mythical battle in 1389, sure, it was a battle that they lost. They fought side by side with Christian Albanians. All Albanians were Christians before the Ottoman Turks came in, but you'll never hear that from the Serbs, because they've been programmed by the Stalinist communist system that they have. I mean, this gentleman may be a good man, but I can tell you he's been programmed very well.
Ian, in the who's going first here? Sterling and Ian. Okay.
Well, it appears that Mr. Milosevic is he's just disagreeing with what NATO says. And as a 14-year-old child, I know that if I was doing this to my parents, they would probably send me to my room and punish me until I was ready to talk like a reasonable person. And so that's what I think what we should do to Milosevic.
Let me respond to that. Mr. Milosevic is a democratically elected president of first of Serbia and now the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. And President Milosevic was not a bad boy of the Balkans, as the Congresswoman stated a few moments ago. He is not only democratically elected president of Yugoslavia, but he is also a cornerstone of the Dayton Peace Agreement reached in Ohio. So he is a factor of peace and stability in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He put his signature behind this agreement. So he is doing best to implement the agreement in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Just look the record.
Well, how does he have this reputation then?
I don't know. This is I think that the people completely simplified the situation on the Balkans. They've been accusing Serbia of trying to overreach or to dominate other Yugoslav republics. But Serbia only had a legitimate interest to think about the interests of the Serbs living in the other republics who've been turning into minority overnight and whose interest has been gravely abused.
Well, first let me say that there's hardly democracy in Belgrade when you saw a prominent general being fired just for merely disagreeing, a prominent university professor of the law school there being fired. There is no democracy, so I would not refer to him as a democratically elected president. As a matter of fact, 100,000 and more Serbs are on the streets of Belgrade because of the elections being fixed, and it wasn't until he turned around and changed the election result that they then, there was peace. But you have here a terrible situation. You've got a man, Slobodan Milosevic, and the world can't be wrong. He's been indicted by the U.S. House of Representatives last September, the U.S. Senate last June, the European Parliament last September, all said in unanimous resolutions that for his actions, brutal actions, genocide, ethnic cleansing in Bosnia and Kosovo, he should be brought to The Hague and tried as a war criminal. I don't see why we're even talking to this man, why Mr. Holbrooke's wasting his time. What interest does the United States have in negotiating a peace with a war criminal? That's what he is. Everybody cannot be wrong.
Mr. DioGuardi, can this conflict, it is a long-standing civil war, can it be solved without military action, outside military action, and without the removal, it sounds to me a few moments ago you were between the lines espousing the removal of Mr. Milosevic?
No, it can't, because this is not just a recent action. You have to go back to 1989 when Mr. Milosevic walked into Kosovo and brutally took away its autonomy. Under the Constitution of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, 1946, and amended in 1974, Kosovo was considered a separate territory, autonomous, and it had an equal vote to Serbia. This is a fact. It had an equal vote to Serbia in the former Yugoslavia. In fact, every 8 years, the president of Yugoslavia was an Albanian. It had its own parliament. It had its own self-administration, own police force, own courts, own school system, own hospitals. Milosevic came in, and in one fell swoop, with a gun to the head of every Albanian parliamentarian, took that away.
Well, you know what, with all due respect, that was then, this is now.
Well, but
can the two sides make it work?
Well, it can't, because we saw what he did in Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia. We acted 2 years too late in Bosnia, and we lost 250,000 people. Only after we struck with our force from the air did Milosevic come to the peace table at Dayton. The same has to happen now. It's the only thing he understands. In fact, he has painted himself in a corner. He knows he can't give up Kosovo without losing his power in Belgrade, so he is willing to take the strikes now to keep that power. It's the only way he'll give up Kosovo.
And our thanks to Nebojša Vojević, and Joe DioGuardi. Thank you both
Thank you.
for joining us on Talkback Live this afternoon.